We have to do the gavel. Call the meeting to order, right? All right, so we're going to get started. Welcome back to day 2 of our community engaged portion of our BSEC meeting here. Welcome back to Morgan State. Some rules to go over. Now, we've been told don't do food and drinks in here. It's fine, just don't spill anything. But I will hear about it. But when we have food, don't bring anything back in here, because I don't want to get in trouble.
Coffee and refreshments.
Coffee and refreshments will be out at 4.
4 or 4:15.
Okay, so 4 or 4:15, and we'll break appropriately. The other thing, bathrooms are out your door here, and then turn to your right. They're immediately out there, right across from the elevators. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about our cross-cutting themes, and then getting feedback from some of our partners. Tanya will be leading a panel discussion with some of our community partners, and then we'll have Ben come up and give us some remarks about what we did earlier this morning. Right.
Great, I'm gonna go first. We're still waiting on some of our candidates.
Oh, okay.
If that's all right. I'll just do this because I think I think we're probably going to lose Farmer Chippy based on the picture of his Jeep he just sent me. So I think he's having some trouble. All right. Hey everybody, good to see you. Thanks for all who came back after a long night last night. Thanks to those who are new today. And so I'm just going to do a couple things here. First of all, yesterday, as was pointed out, we didn't give a project overview. It's kind of like, well, we already know what's going on. So I'm just going to give a couple slides just to remind people where we are. I'm doing this also in a way that some of us discussed earlier today, kind of reflecting on what we heard last night and what that tells us about where we are and where we need to go. And I'm not going to take too much of your time for that, but I'm just going to want to run through some of this. So just as a reminder, like, what is the Baltimore Social Environmental Collaborative? Right? It's a collaborative that is tasked with producing the urban climate science needed to inform community-guided potential equitable pathways for climate action. So key points there, right? We are producing urban climate science, right? And so that's what this is. It's an endeavor to bring together the minds from the community, the minds from the operations folks, the minds from researchers, in order to generate science, okay? It's not an implementation project, it's a science project. That said, it is intended to inform community-guided pathways for action, right? So what we need to do is have science that's actionable. And the premise of BSEC is that the science is only actionable if it is the product of knowledge co-generation with the people who are involved in the actions themselves, right? And so that's the whole kind of founding premise of the project. And the process through which we do this, right, is that we have a process of deliberation on goals and constraints. We're going to do some of that later today, right? And stuff that we've been doing throughout the first year to try to understand what's important, right? What should we be looking at? What are the possible levers? What are the challenges that various members of the Baltimore communities have? On the other hand, on the other side of this, we're building an environmental measurement and modeling system. And there's been some discussion of this, right? Because how do you do those both at the same time? It's a little tricky, right? Because we have to do things like order equipment, calibrate models, build all this stuff, right? And we're doing that as informed by what we already know from our discussions with the partners as we wrote the project proposal and as we went through the first year as to what the goals and constraints are. But there's got to be some flexibility there, right? As we learn more about the goals and constraints are, we then adjust that process. And that all comes together in this trade-off analysis and discussion, which Antonia is going to be talking to us a little bit about in a little bit. And that's the process through which we bring together the science with the goals and constraints to understand what our possible pathways forward are. And then we have to iterate, okay? And I think there's an understanding that over the first year, we've done some decent progress on both of these wings. We haven't seen it come together yet, right? That's just starting now. And as it comes together, the intent is, and I have pretty strong belief in this, that we're going to start seeing some of the outcomes, some of the results that helps understand why this project is important for Baltimore. All right, so this whole idea of co-generating knowledge, right? So what is BSEC doing for science? And the argument is, this is funded by the Department of Energy's Office of Science, and we convinced them that we were going to do really good science. And we said to do really good science, we do this in partnership because we learn from our participating community members and operational agencies about, like, here's some place-based information on what succeeds, right? Here's what's worked, here's what hasn't. Here's what we're trying to do that we aren't quite sure how to do yet, or we think we know how to do, but we don't have the support for it because its value is not recognized, right? We can also see in places where maybe there hasn't been an intervention yet, but there's a vision, right? And so we can talk to folks like Dr. Doris and say, okay, well, here's the vision we've got about what could transform this place. And we know that this vision can be fulfilled. And we know that we can work with the scientists to really assess the value of that, understand which kinds of interventions are going to work for us on which time frames, so to get us where we know that we want to go. In the middle, we've got, some partnerships with the church network that Terrace helped set us up with, right? So working with various different kinds of community networks and saying, okay, how can we do this together to both learn what's going on? So we're measuring what matters, where it matters, and that the data, importantly, goal for Project Year 2 here, the data that we're collecting there is not just understood, but has a sense of ownership and control from the folks who have decided where we should measure the stuff, right? And so that's not just a matter of like, oh yeah, here's an instrument, but it's like, no, this is the data that represents something of value that can be provided for the community by the community. All right, so that's pretty clear, right? I think that BSEC gets a lot, BSEC science gets a lot out of Baltimore, right? Because it's what's making the science possible. So what are we going to do for Baltimore? And this came up in our discussions last night, right? And I'll be honest, I don't know that we've articulated this the best way throughout, right? It's because it's a little bit complicated, because on the one hand, here's what the long-term vision is, right? What we want to be able to do is take that the kind of science that BSEC is doing in a participatory way takes us from argument to evidence. Right. So I think it was said last night kind of eloquently, right? Like, we know trees are good, let's plant them. Right. And I'm not going to disagree with that statement. At the same time, there's a lot we don't know. And there was some good, useful exchange, I think, in the room last night saying, like, okay, sure, but like, what exactly are the trees good for? Like, what are you trying to accomplish with those trees? Like, can we actually say that we can go out and measure things and say, yes, here's what this particular kind of planting in this place at this scale is accomplishing for these defined goals, right? And here's where it's not, and we have to trade off with some other activities. It's very important for BSEC also this evidence leads to action, right? So that we're not documenting inequities we already know exist. Like, one could do a long project putting a finer point on the inequities of Baltimore, right? That's not where we're trying to go with this. We need to document, we need to understand, we need to generate evidence so that it is actionable. And that's where the stuff we're going to talk about today comes in, right? How do we make this actionable? We do it by saying times are tough all over, right? Resources are limited. We need to get certain kinds of investment in action, people's time, money from different investment sources to make these things happen. And so we need to make the case, right, that the evidence is actionable, and we're going to do this through this trade-off analysis that shows here are all the multiple criteria benefits that we can agree upon that we're getting to through these different interventions. And then finally, as we take actions, whether it's maybe an action already going on that we learn about from our community partners that we're going out measuring, or it's an action that we're trying to put in place through BSEC's evidence-based approach, it leads to evaluation, right? And we can then bring the science to that. And that's really important, right? It's important, of course, to understand what works. It's also important if we're going out for funding to tell people like, hey, we're going to be evaluating how this works. And then you get into what we hope is this virtuous cycle, right? It's like, if we bring this to action, we evaluate that action, we see what's working, we adjust as needed, and then we can hopefully get the resources for more action, right? And so that's what we hope to accomplish throughout the project and get into this cycle that outlasts the project itself. So this is, and this is where I really hope and expect we're going to be, right? I have a lot of optimism about where this is going because of what we've been able to do so far, and because I think that the team all the way across the board, right? All the way researchers, community members, government partners, it's just a really strong team. And I think we're going to be able to do this. I also appreciate the fact that it takes time, right? This is not something we can roll out like, hey, we've been going at this for almost a year already, right? And we haven't create action and evaluate it, right? This stuff takes years, all right? And also it takes years and the benefits might take even longer. We're talking about climate change timescales, right? So we're talking about like building resiliency for climate change unfolding on years to decades. So that might not always be satisfying for members of the community who want to see action now, who want to see a benefit right now. So I think that's where it's important. And this is something, you know, as part of the conversation, I'm just trying to summarize here, which is that how we need to be very clear about how we're doing this together. And this is something that, you know, we've been trying to from the beginning, and that it's tough as you get rolling. It's all we all get to know each other. We fight through some bureaucracy. You know, it takes time to get this going, but I feel like we are really, we're really poised now to make this collaborative action go. And that's going to be over the coming months as we try to roll out some community science activities that we've talked about, get BSEC in a role where we're participating in and supporting education and engagement programs that are led by communities. We've already been doing some of this kind of leveraging BSEC for grants, been successful in some small ways, not yet successful in some big ways. We're going to push that forward, try to get successful in big ways where we can start using BSEC's, you know, not just promise of, but real evidence of ability to monitor and evaluate progress to get some implementation grants to the city. And then finally, putting these decisions and data sets in the hands of the community. So we have this great partnership to get some of this instrumentation out, to know where to put it, walking around neighbors together to decide where things could go. Right now, those data, quite frankly, are going to places that are public, but maybe not that accessible. Like it's just not really built for this, right? So we need to get to a place where there is that sense that, okay, the organizations who are partnering in this have an ownership of that data and feel that they can make use of it. Okay. See how I've done this flow chart. This is the version 0.1 of the knowledge flow chart of BSEC, and I didn't get to run this by anybody before I got out here. So, there's gonna be more. It's gonna animate. It's not just that. All right. So here's I'm just gonna try to describe what I think is happening. All right, and then people can correct me, and then somebody, probably Raman, will make a prettier picture out of it. So okay. Who's in BSEC? Okay, so we've got our academic and Department of Energy researchers, right? So like a bunch of us are at universities, some of us are at national labs. It's kind of like the professionalized researcher team, right? The salaried researchers. We then have our partnering agencies and organizations. So that's, you know, of course, the city agencies who wrote this grant with us, the neighborhood groups that wrote it with us, and various other organizations, offices, NGOs who have been kind of part of the team from the beginning. And then we've got a broader group of community participants, people who maybe came on board a little later. We didn't know them, they didn't know us, or maybe people who also have a smaller role to play, who want to get involved in some activity, right? Even if they aren't, you know, a direct partner. We then have a couple of ways that we are approaching this problem. It's a big problem. We have our basic science team. So credit here to Miriam Avens for telling me that we should rename these things. These are our theme teams, all right? Which are essentially, we can quibble because that's what we do as academics about whether it's basic science or translational science. It's kind of basic science, right? It's like, let's study the water, let's study the air, let's study the vegetation and soils, right? And that is grounded in the academic and Department of Energy research part of the team in exchange and communication with the other partners, right? Like learning about what should these teams study absolutely is informed by dialogue, right? Where do we measure stuff is informed by dialogue, and also we'll hope, you know, already and hopefully increasingly going to be done by community participants through citizen science activities. So there's an exchange going on there. The second kind of team we have, and that's going to be the focus of today, are what we've been calling, well, they're putting by various names, or equitable pathway teams, whatever they are, but again, credit to Miriam, maybe we should call them problem teams, or I'm going with problem solving, change this a little bit, all right? Problem-solving teams, okay? Because these are the teams that are saying, okay, there's a problem of extreme heat. What are our options to take it on? There's a problem of air pollution, not just outside, but inside people's homes. How do we take that on? The city needs to decarbonize by 2045, right? It's an opportunity, right? Like, how are we going to do that, right? We've got flooding in people's basements. What are we going to do about that? So those teams are explicitly across the whole spectrum, right? Yes, the researchers are a big part of this. But the problems are being defined by, in partnership with our direct partners mostly, and as we reach out more to other community participants. And in the process we need to play, where we take and say, okay, we know what the problem is, we know generally what some of the concerns are, and turn that into a true trade-off analysis where we can actually turn this into action, where we can turn around and say, in a budget process, for example, well, investing in this achieves these metrics. And that's what our broad consultation among our members of the community, members of the government, members of industry, whoever else is a relevant stakeholder, feel we should go with this, right? And that can then inform the implementation of something like the Baltimore Climate Action Plan. All right. So this is really kind of the heart and soul we're trying to do, and it requires all of us. We then have our Equitable Pathways Steering Committee that's in exchange with all of these. Why? Because, well, they are both members of these groups and also know all these groups, right? And have been instrumental already in pulling together some of the relationships we need here. And they're going to be both reported to and giving guidance to these processes, right? And so there's that exchange going on. And critically involved in all of this are our community engagement team, right? So Kalia, Derek, under the guidance of Tanya and others, right, are the people who are going to help these flows go, all right? So this is my version of how things should work, okay? I'm going to be honest, like, I think some of this is working, all right? I think we've had a lot of success in the first year. I think some of it is not working so well yet, okay? And there are a few reasons for that. So first of all, I can make an excuse. It's like, right, like we had some staff turnover in our community engagement team that caused some, we won't get into it. It's been interesting, right? And so that, like, that just sucks, right? Okay, so that set us back some time, all right? But also I think there's some inherent baked-in challenges here, right? This is a knowledge flow diagram, you know, so it's not a funds flow diagram, right? And so we need to figure that part out too, right? So like, this is a research project. The money is predominantly for research, not exclusively though. We've had funds that need to go get out into the other members of this team beyond the research team to support the activities they want to do that are consistent with what BSEC's trying to do. So we need to really get that rolling in the second year. And even when we do that, I will acknowledge that's some funds, but it's not funds to make this a full-time job for everybody on there, right? It's not even a full-time job for us. Like, we're like on this like 10%, right? But we then need to figure out how to both get BSEC funds flowing and also leverage to bring in additional funds for the project, all right? So it's going to be like, honestly, that has not worked so far, and make the commitment that it will happen, and also be realistic that it's not going to happen in like massive sums, right? It's going to be starter funds. Okay, so what have we done? Again, I think, you know, I think it's been a pretty good year. And so things like, what has BSEC done so far? And this is, sorry for everybody whose stuff I'm not going to put on the slide, because I don't want to talk that long. But the teams that have been putting out these weather stations, so this is a map of the weather stations of Baltimore. The yellow ones are what was there. The red ones are what we put out. When I say we, I mean Darren, Shamara, Terrace and his network, like the people who've been involved in really doing the work, right? Lynn, a handful of people have done this. And, you know, you guys all know, I don't even know what the variables in the background. It doesn't matter. We know what that is, right? So what we're seeing here is that the Black Butterfly didn't have a single weather station. Is that fair to say, Darren? Right? Not a single weather station Black Butterfly until BSEC, okay? And this is what we've done in year one, okay? And it's just the tip of the iceberg, because Darren was doing the due diligence of testing different kinds of equipment, right? And being slow in purchasing because we want to do more. But there's going to be a lot more of that coming. And this is just the weather stations, right? Never mind the other stuff we're putting out. So in the first year, we have established, you know, meteorological environmental monitoring networks in the under-monitored and marginalized, historically marginalized parts of our city. And that's yielding some results, okay? And so again, we can say, oh, we already knew this. Well, maybe I didn't, right? Like that, if we have the measurements from places like our church in LME, and Darren showed this last night, some of you already saw it, right? But I just want to emphasize the point. This is during a heat wave, nighttime temperatures, as we know, or as we think we know, it's part of as we're learning, can be particularly damaging for health. And these East and West Baltimore locations, I mean, this is not scientific, but like, that's not trivial, right? 8 to 10 degree Fahrenheit difference from what they're getting in Roland Park. And that's documentation right there, right? That's evidence. It hasn't solved the problem yet, but it's something that can be used to motivate some action. Also, I just have to have a picture of the people who do the real hard field work. This Claire's team, the UMBC team out getting water quality instrumentation in urban streams coming into Baltimore, right? Like, this is not easy work, not just because you have to be standing out there in waders, but also it's like, these are difficult measurements to take, right? So we're leveraging a tremendous amount of experience from Claire's team to get out there and really document where the pollutants coming from, where the nutrient flows, because that's gonna be really relevant to understanding how we then manage these kinds of pollution. And then just a little work from Elliot here, showing that we're putting these models together, right? And so this is all in year one still, right? So we've got the measurement, we have the models that are going to have to help us to integrate, to understand some of these processes. And then once this is really up and running, then we can say, okay, we've identified a problem. What happens if we test some of these interventions at different scales? What if we plant trees in a certain density? What if we change the building materials? Can we start pushing that curve down, right? And that's something like, well, we can't test that at city scale right now. That would take too long. It's too expensive. But we can model it. Maybe we get some pilot tests out, and then we can say, okay, this is or is not a good investment in something that not just the city should invest in, but that the city must because of all the savings it brings in terms of the costs to well-being of not doing it. Right? Okay. So last point here. So what do we need to do? So we need to do it like a huge amount. Like this is not all we need to do, but some of the things that are on my mind today. That knowledge flow path. As I said, well, first of all, I'll go back and see if I got it right. But like whatever we decide is the right knowledge flow path, we really need to get flowing. You know, it's like it's working some, it's not working at other times, right? And so that's something we really got to focus on. Also, really eager to integrate BSEC citywide climate resilience efforts. So we heard from Ava last night about what's going on with the Baltimore Climate Action Plan, the DP3 plan. There's a huge role for BSEC to play there. And I think that we can do some service to the city and also learn from the city by doing that. These problem-solving exercises, right, that Antonio is going to introduce and that we're going to do in our breakouts today, we're going to get those moving forward because I think that's where we're going to see the science meet the priorities in an important way. And then just continue to build the foundation for actionable climate science, right? I think, again, I just like, I'm always constantly impressed by like the team, by the energy as more people come into the BSEC family, just seeing how much we have to work with, right, in terms of human capital. There's a lot we can do. And so we're just gonna keep building that as we move forward in all these activities. All right, I've killed enough time for the panel to get here, so that's good. So I'll stop, well, 3 or 4 of the panel. The 4th panelist, Jeep broke down. And so we're going to have a 3-member panel, but there'll be opportunity to hear from our 4th panelist later in the day. Hopefully we'll make it over. So I'll stop there. And Tanya, should I hand over to you to lead this up? Okay. Well, actually, sorry. Any questions? Good. Perfect. So we're all on board. All right. Over to Tanya.
No, I'm actually going to talk about the Equitable Pathway Steering Committee and introduction on the panel. I did not. No. Okay. Good afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So glad to see you. Okay, so a couple things that I want to do. One, I want to talk a little bit about the Equitable Pathway Steering Committee, and then I want to introduce our panel and bring them up. And then we're going to just have a conversation mainly about their reflections over their first 5 months on the Equitable Pathway Steering Committee. And then talk a little bit about the climate, how they perceive or what they think that we need to be doing in terms of climate and energy and environmental risk and opportunities in Baltimore. And then also the role that science can play. So first thing I want to do is talk a little bit more about the role of the Equitable Pathway Steering Committee. So Ben started off by kind of showing you all how we are doing the communication within BSEC. So our Equitable Pathway Steering Committee is one of our main conduits with getting information out to the community and receiving information back from the community, and also having them to oversee the research that's being done. So one of the things that we always want to make sure that is true for BSEC is the research is grounded in those, and I borrow from President Biden, those kitchen table issues that folks are having in the community. So what are their concerns about climate change? What are their concerns about things that's happening in their environment, in their community? So we want to make sure that BSEC doesn't get too far away from that. And if it does, then it's the job of that steering committee to kind of like pull our coattails and bring us back and make sure that it stays grounded. So yes, we do have researchers that are doing some of the basic science, but we want to make sure that, again, as Ben said, it's actionable. So it's basic science that we can apply. Okay. So just to talk a little bit about what the Equitable Pathway Steering Committee is. Again, the steering committee guides the research and it serves as a link to the wider community. This committee has veto power over BSEC's activities it considers inconsistent with community interests. The role of the Equitable Pathway Steering Committee has been specifically outlined. And again, we can talk about how well we have achieved that ideal, and we can talk about ways in which we need to improve. Ideally, they are to help BSEC researchers understand the concerns of the neighborhoods where they are concentrating their research. This includes understanding the trade-offs in various climate adaptation strategies. In this way, the Equitable Pathway Steering Committee guides the development of the research questions that drive the science. Also is to locate on-the-ground partners to implement pilot projects of climate adaptation strategies, to create opportunities for climate science, to provide guidance to ensure that the research and the recommendations improve equity and respond to community priorities. And lastly, to serve as a liaison to the larger community to ensure inclusive community outreach. So the Equitable Pathway Steering Committee, they have their own regular meetings. They currently meet once a month. And again, the Equitable Pathway Steering Committee only recently started. I want to say it was that you had your first meeting in June of this year. Right, so that already was one of the kind of, as Ben kind of stood up here and talked about some of the ways in which we might have went wrong. Yes, we had some staffing issues and some staffing turnover, but also we didn't get the Equitable Pathway Steering Committee up and running at the very beginning of BSEC, which started in November of 2022, James? November, right. So that ideally would have been the first thing that happened. And I know it didn't look like it, but we were behind the scenes trying to get it to happen. But you know, things that went wrong, we can't go back and undo, but we can certainly look forward. Okay, with that, I just want to talk about how the Equitable Pathway Steering Committee is formed. So when we first wrote the grant, ideally, again, this is ideally, we wanted to make sure that it had a lot of community weight. So out of the 12-member Equitable Pathway Steering Committee, 6 of them actually come from the community of Old Goucher and Broadway East. So that was intentional. We wanted to make sure that that was heavily weighted in their favor. The other 6 was to be a mix of local, state, and federal government agencies, businesses, and nonprofits. So that's how the other 6 would have rounded out. As they come up, they'll tell you a little bit more about themselves, and you can see we haven't quite made that nice, 12-person match, but we're getting there. What else do I want to say about that? And okay, just another thing I just want to say. Our Equitable Pathway Steering Committee members are paid for their time. Now, again, it's like Ben was saying, this is not a full-time job, so it's not a lot of money, but we do recognize that their time is valuable and we value their time. So with that, I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions about just the overview of the Equitable Pathway Steering Committee before I invite our some of our committee members up to the panel.
Can you say who's on it so far?
Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Of course, I'm going to miss somebody. So we have Farmer Chippy. I'm going to go by memory. Y'all going to help me. We have Farmer Chippy, who is with Plantation Park Heights. We have Dr. Doris Minor Terrell, and she is with Broadway East. We have Terrace, who is with Temple X. We have Kelly, who is with Old Goucher. We have Mateus, who is with Old Goucher. We have Matt Overdy. Thank you. Remind me of which organization he's with.
Broadway East.
Broadway East. Okay. We have Cynthia Rose, who is
Their community.
okay. Thank you so much. Alex Smith and Ballington. Thank you so much. Okay, Alex Smith is with Alex Landscape. No, Division Street Lands. Did they just change their name? I see a different email tag. Okay. Okay, maybe that's what it was. Okay, Division Street Landscaping, and then Ballington, who is with. Okay, I should have said you all do it because I'm over here like, oh man, they're gonna put me on the spot. I'm gonna miss somebody, and they're gonna think that I'm unimportant. They are not. Ava, yes, Ava Richardson. She's with the Office of Sustainability. Okay, did I miss anybody else?
Are they on the website too?
They probably are, but I don't have it in front of me, so I'm like, oh gosh, I'm gonna go by names. Okay,
Yeah, no, okay.
great. Thank you so much for that. All right, with that, if there are no other questions, I'm gonna invite our panelists up, Dr. Doris, Kelly, Terrace, and I think you said Farmer Chippy, his car situation is gonna allow it. All right, and I'm gonna let them introduce themselves and you can say anything that I might have missed about yourself.
I'll start with
Please.
myself. Hi, I'm Doris from the Broadway Community. I'm glad to be with you today, but I first want to give major kudos to the team that put the project together today. Last year, the first year, it was awesome, just presenting and getting started. And my wish at that time was that you all survived long enough. Today, my wish is that we're able to tell the world the progress that you've made from last year to this point. The news is always full of activities that are usually negative. We understand that, but I like this story to be told. When I turn on CNN, I like to see this story. It talks about what people are doing for marginalized communities to make life better. The energy that they're bringing to the table, the brain power that they're willing to share with others to make life better. That's a big energy.
Yeah.
That's a 60-minute story. So kudos to you for being here today. And thank you, Ben, for clearing the air and solving all the problems.
Thank you. My name is Kelly Cross, resident of the Old Goucher community, a co-founder of the Baltimore Climate Resilience Coalition, and also currently executive director of World Development Baltimore, which is a film studio project in the city. So I would love to, reiterate what Dr. Mozzarella said. I think we've had, I'm thrilled this project is happening. We've been doing a lot of work in Old Goucher over the last decade, primarily led by my husband, Matej Brzezinski. But we need evidence. We need data to support and show what we see happening on the ground, what we know is happening with the green infrastructure and the trees that are being planted. And I think this is a great avenue for that to happen. The challenge is yes, but the fact that this is happening at all, I think is a great opportunity.
Thank you. Seriously.
Terrace King, I'm really honored to be here. I was really coming away to the project a year or so ago. I'm founder of Templex School and co-founder of Baltimore Forest School. And we have had an outstanding year. This young man right here is one of the success stories for our program. He's City College 10th grader as a contract happens to be interested. And for us, as an institution, we're advocates for children, specifically I was trying to be here. Someone I looked up to my whole career as a kindergarten teacher. But the main thing that we do as an institution is we connect the state connection between faith institutions, research institutions, and city schools. And for us, this project has been revolutionary. No one clapped when we mentioned the Butterfly now has,
Yes.
weather stations, and I want to clap. There's been a lot of back end, it's like emotional work. You ride in communities who've been deprived for so long. There's a lot of emotion there. I'm gonna read you in my place in my church talking about weather stations and why it's happening again, right in our communities trying to extract data. But we found a partnership here. Listening ears from institutions and people who are very busy. And what we appreciate with people coming from all over the country, not from the same, is the fact that there's the authenticity to this engagement. For us, we've had, James, you had 30, 20, 15 maybe? Students here that we had recently. So the children of Baltimore have been intimately connected with this. It's been our passion. All these weather stations, churches, children were there. And so I know the last question about the experience, this has been life changing for my community. I teach studies weather Sunday, and my kids look at those weather stations and the data. We talk about urban ecology and the connection with the Bible. And so we're inspiring a lot of people that understand science in our own ways. Thank you.
You want to say something?
Sometimes I'm the troublemaker in the family. I'd like to invite Mateus to come down and take this chair for us.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
He has lots of information he could share.
Okay, we'll let him take a seat and he can introduce himself to us.
Hi, I'm Mateus. I'm from Old Gloucester, and I am an urban practitioner in green infrastructure.
That's what you can do, it's fine. All right, so, I'm sorry, did you want to, okay. So our first question is, again, reflecting on the first 5 months, what are some of the things that we got right and where are some areas for improvement? Don't be shy, lay it on us, we want to hear it.
I'm sure this group will not be done. So I am going to leave that question with Terrence's statement about the black butterfly. You know, the black butterfly is hard to trust. Your experiences have been different. So for us, sometimes the key word around research and data collection, when you hear the word Hopkins, he's breathing, because you're saying we will not benefit. So the first thing the black butterfly had to do is to get over it. Because the souls that will be traveling through the black butterfly and bringing information to us are people. So we are trusting the people, not an institution. So our faith is in what the scientists are doing and what they will share with us. So getting past that was a struggle, especially for women like me. You say, what has history delivered to us? No history, but I also know it. So I know that. I know that. So it's up to me to have my faith that you will bring back to the butterfly what we need to change lives. I know that there's a dialysis center on several different things. I'm hoping that the information you bring back will bring solutions to what our next steps are to limit that, what's happening from an environmental perspective. My answer to the first question is that we have learned some things, if nothing else, and learn it and exchange of information with each other. What? Other problems.
I would agree with that. I would say, I would add to that, I think there's been an issue, more of a structural issue, around just, sort of translation. I mean, when you have sort of, people in the community, who have very different experiences, and then you're trying to have that interface and that translation between community and academia, even with the best of intentions, there's a lot of big hurdles to overcome. You're trying to translate language, you're trying to translate even the modality in which things are communicated, like the notion of, I noticed sort of when we're talking about community meetings, there's a preference in the institutional setting to have people formally come together and sit down at a meeting and have a back and forward conversation like this. Whereas if you're in community, I mean, you do stuff like, you have a cookout or you walking people around and you're exchanging as much or sometimes more information, but in a very different format. So I think we're still in the process of trying to figure out what that translation activity looks like, and how to really engage. So I think, and I have to give kudos to this team. I know it's been difficult, but in the decade when my day shop was in Baltimore, typically when I see discussions around community engagement, it's very much more a form of tokenism. And I don't even think that's always intentional. I think that, again, it has a lot to do with just the structural premises of a lot of these institutions. And so when you're trying to get from tokenism to actual engagement, that can be a challenge. process-wise, things often aren't set up at institutions to allow that accessibility to be easily done. So we're working through that right now.
What you said was also working for making sure we have a lot of different communities.
Terrence? I'd love for us to just go right down the road.
Yeah, sure. And I think, I guess I'll start with, I don't think there are any challenges here, only opportunities. I want to speak to some things that were discussed yesterday, and I think when I entered this conversation, we were at University of Baltimore, and it was a gesture from our community to say, Black church specifically of Baltimore wants to be involved. It's a challenge for us in looking at the whole city is looking at land, right? We heard about some units being placed in specific places, and to have community members who care enough to steward these things beyond this time. I'm a member of the Baltimore Eagles community that's been running for so long, and people really value things that they have ownership of, and they can touch and feel. So, my community really cares about these weather stations that are at our church. I say that to say that there's so much inspiration here when I read the grant around work that's already been done. This project is utilizing data that's been cultivated over 20 plus years. And now there is an opportunity to bring the whole community together at one time. Success story, we did get a small grant, we mentioned it earlier, to bring people together next year in an organized way after the Baltimore Eagles event, and invited everyone now to have more place-based conversations with strategic places around the city. I think what's gonna come from this are the actual questions in the community that this group wants to hear. Our value is to say, welcome to Baltimore, like people coming from the state, like, and also welcome Baltimore to your science. And shout out to Stuart Vivian, Morgan Grove, and all the team at BSEC. The fact that this city has such a long-term study, I think is one of the reasons why this project is here. So big opportunity to conduct the last night more than CEO. And there's an opportunity for real social impacts, implementation money, right? There's so many avenues of how we're saving the system money. Trav, as a young man, can easily be a sweet boy, and his dad, I know his dad, and I mean, very easily in these pipelines, but he's here right now with a craft and a career. He dropped out of high school right now and got money to be here today. But this is the outcome, output, the systems, they force them here, but that's what they need to hear. How do we save money right now by engaging with every human in this city in 3 years? The Black church of this city is the easiest way. We, over 500 churches in the city, faith leaders all over the city are saying, welcome, BSEC, to our community. And in that space, you will be able to hear from every constituent in this town that have real issues. I think about North and Aspen, we walk on that block. And I mention often about the power of a child. We watched 3-year-old children on North and Aspen put up a weather station, and the zombies around them, we've studied, yielded at the engagement. Then said, city forester came. He saw it. I believe in this moment, there's only up from here. Little bit of implementation money, and the reason why the community asks us about money is because we know how much we have the power, and we are valuable. The federal government lost $14 million probably from this fight. How much did indirect rate at the house?
The indirect rate is 64%, we can do the math. Yeah.
How much is the indirect rate in the state?
60, 70,
What's the indirect rate at the UMC?
54.
To do research on your campus, nothing. So we know the number. Now we have an opportunity to activate the people. And the beautiful thing is, yes, we have Hopkins, all the work that's done, but we trust Morgan State University. The first community engagement event we had Tanya said it with me up the street, still not. DPW was there. And we curated an experience for the children, community, scientists, and the government. As John said yesterday, we have to make sure the government knows why they're about to spend the money. We have that now. And it's because of Black power. Kelly, I met him for the first time. His brother said, I just really work with my husband. That's power. Dr. Doris, the story of how this meeting came to be, she came to someone with a problem, then the grant came. That's power. We know the story of all the money. And for the system to know they can save and maybe make millions of dollars because of the work you do is probably the only reason why you do work. Morgan, you just told me up the air. We need to drop the mic moment also. BES hasn't studied the city. Stuart Pickett didn't study the city for it to say the thing. He studied the city so we can sustain the world. Come to this from a vantage point, being in Shanghai, knowing how to scale. This is easy work. We welcome you all to our city. There's no challenge to it, only politics. And when we get with the community, only thing you need to make sure is we are with you. It's gonna get volatile. I'm from Randallstown, Maryland, in county. Kelly, you from here? They care. Who's from here? You from here? Right. So the key is we have to follow Dr. Doris. And the storyline is the only reason why this is gonna happen is because the children of Baltimore. And we all need to yield the resource and the power to the people. And the only thing that will be a challenge for scientists moving forward is if you don't start respecting us. Because I think there needs to be training for the scientists how to engage with us in a way. There's nothing really sophisticated on these boards. The most sophisticated thing is what you will experience this year. When we bring peace to this engagement in science. So that's my.
Thank you.
We're gonna take your meeting from just a minute.
Okay.
So you have given them your side of what life is like and what you see. I would like to hear from this one. What's the greatest fear as they approach such? Is it fear of the community? Is it fear of acceptance? What is that would be a barrier? If any, there may be none. Let's get there first.
We can keep listening to you in 5 years. So that's a good one. I mean, so my fear for this project, right, is that let me tell you, I'm not afraid of this project. Okay, so we were talking about this earlier. It's like this project has various clients in various directions, right? And our primary client is our sponsor, right? The Department of Energy. I am so not worried, right? We got this like world-class scientists, people who like heroes of mine ended up on this project, right? Because we all work together. That was great. So I'm not worried about this. But my fear is our inability to deliver meaning from this. Right? Because, and this is always a challenge, right? So it's like we are aiming pretty high if we say that we're going to be able to change the way that decisions are made in a city like Baltimore, in a way to be more equitable, and that the science is going to contribute and help that along. And so I'm afraid of that not happening. And I'll be honest, that's why I feel like, among other reasons, like all of the other things we want to do together, I think have their own value, like perhaps a greater value, right? Getting the youth involved, trying to do education programs, doing community science, all of that. That's all got its own value. And also I feel like it's important to me because we can then deliver value in those ways, in relationships, because I still have this fear that we're not going to complete the arc on changing the way decisions are made. It's a fear. It's like I'm optimistic. I think we might do it, but it's a fear that that's going to be really challenging. So that's my research, not the guarantee.
Others?
I think one of my fears going into this is that, this project would be an academic project in contrast to a mission project. And the contrast that I would make is people are engaged, they're like, I'm gonna collect data, I'm gonna have my students educated, and I'm gonna write papers and I'm gonna get tenure. In contrast to, we're gonna do science and we're gonna make a difference in the world. That's what I would call mission-oriented science. We may call it actionable science or whatever, but it's doing science to make a difference. I think the other part to it is, in the engagement, is it transactional? And is it encumbered by lots of rules about this is how we all should behave? The scientists, the universities, they have their rules, communities have their rules. But maybe we relax and trust each other, and we do, yes, I'm gonna say it, Jared, it's like we decide we're gonna have conversations, we're gonna play. And, you know, you made the comment about modalities, and, you know, another way of saying that is how we choose, you know, is it an auditorium or do we have a cookout, right? And everyone relaxes. So I think that, you know, what is the purpose of it? Is it academic or is it mission? And what is the community that comes? The community then uses the phrase family, the BSEC family. Now, what is the BSEC community? And that it's a little bit more relaxed. And you know, it's not encumbered by rules and jackets and ties or whatever.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in? Oh, please.
I think the other side, the other one on my list of fears is that the science that we're gonna generate, can we work with you or, you know, how, and do it so that we can express it and get it to in a way that even the citizen science could pick up when the project ends, that you could carry on with this and help get the data we need to continue to influence decisions being made. And getting away from the science communication to the communication to the public broadly. And we're very easy at slipping back into scientific talk.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
And having you all tell us, hey, stop, tell me, you know, tell us how we're not saying right. We're not saying the way that people understand.
Thank you. Oh, here we go. Okay.
I'll say one more kind of to build on what Ben said. I am also worried that we may not complete that part. But our ambitions are always greater than our ability to achieve. So in some of these things, we will not complete that part. And I'm afraid that there might not be understanding that we are reaching for more than we can do. Good intent, but then to some degree we will there. And we mutually understand.
Thank you.
But to know that you are reaching powerful to us. You just need to know you are reaching.
I think I have one more hand and then we'll go to Mateo.
Hi, good evening. My name is Rolinda Wimbush, and I do a lot of community organizing and environmental justice organizing out in the South Baltimore regions, and I'm a proud alumni of Morgan State University. So I'm super happy to be here and be back and be like home, you know. I have a question around the weather monitoring machines that were set up and integrated into the Baltimore communities and the Black Butterfly Baltimore. I have and maybe I missed day one, so maybe this is answered in day one. So pardon me if it's a repeat. I want to know, what is the total outcome of the weather machines? Have they been placed just as a one-time thing, or is it some kind of educational component that backs its existence? Are the kids going to continue to learn about what it means to monitor? Is it some kind of workplace training or some type of workforce training that's going to be integrated behind this project?
Thank you for your question. However, I just want to say for this panel, this is our Equitable Pathway Steering Committee, and I think Darren might be a better one to answer your question. So
So yeah, the main training, like every Saturday in Baltimore right now, similar to start. We have children, Smithsonian interns, Smithsonian interns, Child Friday right here, Smithsonian, and they are checking 4 rounds. You know, we're trying to get the seats right, but they are around engaging with these weather stations every week. I think for us church communities, we are communicating to our children through programs specifically. And I think the four school and the city schools is going forward with a them. And shout out to this project because this project from the Smithsonian work with city schools helps us to create real participatory science long term. I think it's a beautiful thing to have Smithsonian engaged in that way, specifically microclimate sensors as well. And then we're asking real questions about how do we change things in the future. So we're coupling this up with also tree planting engagement. So the children can now track that data, but also prove the outcomes. And I think the last thing is the 1,000 acres of city school plan that can be accessed and be kind of engaging as well. And shout out to Darren again, everyone keeps shouting out a lot of things that's about my story. That's smart as well. Setting up this collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, okay.
I have one quick comment in the spirit of this, and building off what's been said. I'm teaching how for Hopkins. My biggest worry is time. This is a 5-year project. We're talking about children time scales, which goes well beyond 5 years. So it's early to start talking about it, but what is the sustain? What is going to sustain after that initial 5-year project? How do we build those networks to be strong enough that we find additional sources of income to continue to work? Because 5 years is not enough, and I think we all know that. And so we need to talk about how we can transition this project and this seed into something that continues to sustain.
Oh, thank you for that.
Well, I can say, I think partially it's going to be the relationships that are created throughout this process. So, meeting people, knowing who's doing what in parts of the city, building trust so that we can collaborate on other opportunities, whether those are grants, whether those are actual direct action projects in the future. There is certainly money that's out there. I think we're sort of getting through our first iteration of figuring out how to go for that money independently. Some independent organizations up the shop. When Paige was able to get an entire UN delegation up to the neighborhood just a couple of weeks ago, made some incredible worldwide connections there. As you may know, the governor is convening a task force on philanthropy. So a number of different foundations, some of which are coming and meeting and talking with us now. So we're beginning to integrate these conversations about BSEC, about climate monitoring, about the sustainability of this process into those conversations. So I see this as sort of the very beginning step of sort of integrating and bringing those resources to bear with this framework in mind. But we've got to create the framework. We've got to build trust. We're all human beings. I think that trust building is really key. And that's why, to the comment about sort of the fear of not completing that arc, I don't fear not completing that arc. I just think we have to extend the time frame that we're looking at for completion of that arc. I mean, I know just in our work in Old Goucher, it's been, a decade that we've worked, and there have been multiple times where it looks like things are going to fail, you're getting challenged, you're having to fight. And what I've just learned is if you just stick it out, it's persistent, a lot of those challenges end up turning, as Terry mentioned, into opportunities. And people come out of the woodwork that you wouldn't have anticipated from the outset.
I think I also wanted to mention maybe about on people's studying the fact that when I've read at least this project is not inspired, but it has this space community. And I'm not sure, how long you've been at Hopkins, but I think the next 100 years, hopefully will be vegan and convenient. And I think maybe now is making sure that this is a cycle for politics. And I think our goal with these 7 events is we will have every city council person in that room, the governor hopefully will join that room. And what you said, the state attorney, the connection between trees and crime has been talked about. So I think coming to these engagements this year, and again, Hopkins, so many people here from Hopkins, I think BS is a great way to keep it going on.
For us, change the same thing that BSEC for the first year, open doors for many of us on the projects we were doing. And I would think that it also allowed a showcase.
It did. Actually, that's a really good point. And that's actually, I think, a key thing. The showcasing piece of BSEC is very critical because, at least in Old Goucher, so I'm obviously we're very biased, we live there and we put a lot of time there, but I think just objectively speaking, Old Goucher is very important because it is just geographically the dead center of Baltimore City. It is the most diverse neighborhood of Baltimore City, ethnically, socioeconomically, racially. It's been kind of odd because it's, as we're going to use the nomenclature of the white L and the black butterfly, Old Goucher is technically in the white L, but it's the only still majority black neighborhood in that white L as you're coming down the Charles Street corridor. So it's this place where kind of East and West Baltimore meet, North and South Baltimore come together all in this center part of the city. And we've done a lot of work, but things like climate resilience don't register with people as much as things like the small businesses, the jobs, the bars and restaurants we brought in. Because those are things that people typically engage in. So if I mentioned a spot like Baden or Clavel, people know those places. They're like, oh, that's a new neighborhood, that's what we work on. They recognize that. But when I try to explain that the foundation for getting those businesses to open was actually the green infrastructure work that was done in the neighborhood, and people feeling comfortable walking on the street, and that the crime went down because of the work that Mateus did in the neighborhood. That's difficult for people to process until you start getting a platform to be able to broadcast that more broadly. And so that's what I think is important in terms of platform, and also in terms of pulling together different strands and different kind of arenas of thought. One thing last thing I'll say on this, and I'm sorry, it's just this Baltimore Climate Resilience Coalition. So when we started this, we actually started this Climate Resilience Coalition before BSEC. I mean, this was Ms. Doris and I had talked about this and began this back in 2022, I believe, early 2022. And part of the impetus behind that was a recognition that there was very little emphasis on a holistic approach to community development that included not only green infrastructure, but the economic piece, the pedestrian piece, the equity piece, the no displacement piece. And then you have all these different organizations working in silos, but there was no way to really pull all this together. And so I think what having this platform is allowing us to do is to say, hey, this is not just about climate stuff, but climate stuff will lead to economic development, lead to crime, lead to all these health benefits.
That's a really good segue, and I'm going to actually start with Mateus. So what are some of the climate and environmental risk and opportunities that you see in Baltimore?
Well, I think from Old Goucher perspective, or also I would say like occupied perspective, I think it's the key. It's a silent leader, as Ben said. We are seeing if we want to change something, it would require something really deep, changing how we are building the city and how we are living. So more dense city and also more green city, relying on the city that relies on public transit, and that basically we're thinking that bring equity in.
Others?
I wanted to mention that when I went to the project and we sat down together, I was so inspired by the phasing, right? There's a powerful thing around ownership. And what you two, what you did in that community was you owned the property and space and then owned it on the back. Like a lot of people buy property in Baltimore, and we've seen it all city. They're in New York City, right? But they owned it and then they owned it and then they created something so beautiful. And I think you're spot on about it being dead center, but that strategy is, I think, a broader approach for community is to understand what do we own, right? We own these buildings, we own this, and with this project in Old Goucher we've done is also part of value proposition around, yeah, I have this stretch of land that could be 1,000 different buildings, but if I contact, Riley at CERT, I can, or, State Forest, I can plant trees here and make just as much money around the fact that I'm changing the city as I do building new infrastructure. And so the opportunity that we do have is the fact that there's amazing systems in the city to develop trust on the land, right? There's amazing systems in the city to take wood from a lot of these buildings and break them down and turn them into things. So, you know, shout out to the forest lovers. I mean, a lot of years of experience cultivating, but what you all showed how Old Gaucho is like, this is how it can come to be. And I appreciate also like not getting permission. Like when you get permission to go to Ashburn Forest and start cleaning up, right? I took a walk in there, I saw trash, the kids were walking through there, so I called my frat brothers to clean it up. And then I talked to Katie from Green Space, and she told me you could put land in trucks. And I'm like, what? You can do that in the city? She's like, yeah, like, and we walked through it, and I'm like, wait, this is the model for how we save the money and how we take care of space, but you don't ask for permission, you go into and find the system in the government how to frame it out. So the fact that this kind of program exists, the fact that you have advocacy in space like Old Gaucho around the city, it is going to bring an international frame around that city that's in a beautiful corridor for just everything. And everyone, I think that's what you just said, everyone wins from that, right? There's so many pipelines, but new businesses come here. And I think the main thing is also how do we make sure that people in those communities stay there? I was at an event, I know Abby, you introduced me to like this new community state around, you know, I was at this, and you know, at this conference. And you all mentioned the fact that like the more and more infrastructure stuff we do in developments, the more and more people have to pay. But it's actually like, how do we have these conversations in the city around? How do we make sure people don't have to move out of these communities that now are green and are now attractive to new audiences? And how do we not have what happened in DC happen in Boston?
So BSEC has existed, we know for that year, we're at our second, but we could say that BSEC has empowered communities that otherwise would not have found anyway.
Yeah. So what do you think the role of community science is in empowering or producing community resilience?
I would say.
Yeah, well, I would say, you know, my face is being quiet and humble over here, but I think, you know, it's the community science is really important because I'm glad that things that he's just noticed anecdotally over the years, living in the community, is actually being respected. Because I think often, again, we talk about this academic community divide, and it's funny because I know we use the word community. I'm in this phase right now where I'd like to find another word, because I almost feel like, not today, but I almost feel like the word community, it's almost gotten this sort of hierarchical notion. It's what I've tended to done when I'm dealing with institutions and folks. There's sort of the thing that, okay, well, we got the academics, and then, you know, my patients here saying, well, I'm noticing that the pouring concrete, having concrete sidewalks, that's really hot. But the pavers are not hot. Well, you go and try to take that and talk to people about it, knowing from your own experience, that's what's happening on your block. And then you're getting all this pushback from the folks in the agency or the institution. That's not true. And we had, you know, that had been researched. Or you say, why would I know that? Because I'm noticing that my trees I'm planting in concrete sidewalks are dying and they're not on the pavers. So having some ability to actually just recognize that this anecdotal stuff of people living in neighborhoods has validity is a very important first step.
I think also community-based science, and to that point, you mentioned like, you know, Kelly, you come at it from a frame of ownership, right? And I think the beautiful thing now, and we talked about it before, is like, we're not operating at all until we have ownership over the data on the back end, right? Even more so, like the spaces where these weather stations are, we have ownership of in the frame. And so community science gives us an opportunity to community to negotiate the data farm that's been happening for so long and involves people with institutions. It prevents a lot of the, hey, may I ask you this question? No. I've had researchers from this project show up at sites with children, take pictures, not ask me, tell me, I really want to hear more about this piece. And there's no interaction with, you know, and I don't think they know we run a research institution, but we also understand that like those pictures are valuable. And, you know, when it comes to community science, there has to be more of this channel, boundary, or transparent, whatever you want to say it. Institutions that have the community's data ownership in mind first. We negotiated for 6 months with Smithsonian, right? We're still negotiating, right? Who owns what? And it's annoying, you know, but they have had the also to, we're just not gonna do work. And then it's the next step here of like the abuse of like kids in this range, like we're telling everyone right now. Me, well, they aren't asking our people for this. They're coming in, they're acting like they're introducing us to each other. So now that we see it, and now that we have this platform, we got 4 years to talk about who's racist in the account. Because also the frame of things is, you know, we come in peace. You harm in the context of community science when you come, you don't even engage us like you own everything you're about to say. Nothing matters in this project. We don't give you our pain. It's our trauma. My great grandfather, I tell the Morgan story all the time. The trees that iceberg will burn on my great grandfather's forest. In North Carolina, this is trauma for me. But it's healing because I'm doing it with Claire and Ben, and they really care, right? But also we have to have a conversation about who owns the data after this is done. And I think in this engagement in community science, we're telling the community, hey, you're worth billions of dollars. And they're like, what? What do you mean? Well, this institution just gave this institution 50 million. They gave them 80 million to do what? Ask questions about you. So now we can negotiate, right, into the future. And now we can make long-term projections how we look. And say, how do we keep going in this conversation? That's like 50 grants together from now until, you know, and you all are perfect at that because we have what's needed is the problem. You have the technique. You spend so much time. Then said one day, I can make it rain. I said, then you were the first person who told me you can make it rain. And now next year I have $30,000. Not like looking to you, but to me, I was buying coffee all last year. These programs, it's you make it rain. So if you have the skill to make it rain, we can give you the ownership of our pain, and we can shift the whole thing with one spoon. And by 2030, it's the big day for the Forest Service. We can prove to the world that we can change this thing. But what they didn't know about you, what Dr. Joseph we keep talking about, they own this project. So I snuck in, again, and I was like, wait, they own this thing. Let's make sure more people own this soil. And then the beautiful thing here is we're working as we're trying to work as a team. And another thing is we are always going to have our discussions behind the scenes because that's a role of how we lead. But I think the beautiful thing with community science right now is we can own this into the future.
So can I just talk about the struggle of education around this?
Yeah.
But I think for us, maybe they'll correct me if I'm wrong. We need to know how opening doors on where we, for example, do we take it to City Hall and say, this is going on? We need this to be accessible to the people. So that we're just not talking about the traffic accident down. We're also talking about the signs that are taking place within the neighborhood. Today we're missing government issue. Today we're missing the mayor issue. How do we tell other people that this is going on and how important it is for your supply? So that you are not looking for which options they're saying I'm not going to select. Look at the little portable ones to help me get to the market. What? People should be learning to get better at how we figure out which that information. That's our task. We need to work. Right now, it's a weakness for us. We gotta push. It's not just all It's on my side of the community. Pay per view, push. And we are surrounded, so if you don't know us, just approach it. Let's talk about it.
Well, on that note, we want to thank our panel. Thank you all so much.
We apologize for hijacking your agenda.
And actually, I think this is now coffee break.
I'm hoping it's possible.
I do too, so you'll find out that they put our coffee out there. Enjoy. Okay, what is it, like 15 minutes?
Let's say 15.
Okay. So I hope the people online can hear us, and I hope the people in the room can also hear me, and I'll just start. So I'll just go through this equitable pathways method or approach we keep talking about. So I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview of what is the method itself. So it's not just, us meeting in a room. There is an actual, methodological approach behind it. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background on what that is and what we hope to get from the breakout sessions that are happening later. Okay, so here. Okay, so I've seen this slide tomorrow. We keep talking about the same 4 topics. So we are set to tackle several important urban problems. So the 4 that I'm highlighting here and the 4 that we'll be talking about later are urban flooding, heat waves, greenhouse gas emissions, and air quality. And these came up from the all hands meeting that we had last January. So these were the sort of 4 key problems that we decided to prioritize. And then for every one of these problems, we all recognize that there is several potential solutions to it. So there's many ways to go about addressing any one of these problems. The challenge is that it's not clear, it's not obvious how to choose what's the right solution all the time. And part of the reason why it's not super clear or obvious how to choose is because we recognize that it's very important to acknowledge and clarify how it would work for those who live with a potential solution. So if the people living with a potential solution love it or hate it, it's very important. And secondly, if a lot of these solutions are going to live in our cities, we're putting them in our neighborhoods, they're going to be there for 30 years or for 50 years. We care about how they will perform over those decades. Yeah, so it's not just a solution for now and for me here, but it's a solution that's going to be there for a long time. And this is hard because when we say about, we care about the community and how things are perceived, these problems look different to different groups. And there is no single obvious solution that will make everybody happy. And we recognize this in our lives and how we talk with our families and our friends. Not everybody agrees on everything. And another complication is that when we think about the future, it's unclear how these problems will evolve in the future. And I'll give you another example on that. And it's also complicated when you start thinking about how these potential solutions might interact. When Everett yesterday mentioned, we have several different problems. So how can I think about solutions that touch on all problems or not get in other solutions ways? Yeah. So how do we think of these things together? So building on that, and what I meant about the future is that there's a lot of things that we do know, but there is also a lot of things that we don't know, especially when we look forward. And these are questions like demographic changes, climate change. We have great experts in this room, but even these experts were told we don't have the definitive answers to these questions. We know a lot, but we're not perfectly certain. And that matters because that should affect, and it does affect, what solutions we identify, what answers we find to our problems. So What this means is that typical planning approaches don't work. So a typical planning approach would mean that you have maybe some experts, some consultants maybe, and all these people get in a room and they agree on what the future will be like. So they use some climate projection or something, and they agree, okay, that's the future. And then we use that future to then say, we're gonna find what's the perfect solution. And it's usually some solution that's the cheapest, oftentimes, depending on who's paying for it. And then we just put it in the world and we hope it works. But as I just said, there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of uncertainty about the future. We don't know if it gets warmer, how much warmer? Where is it gonna get warmer? If it gets wetter, where is it getting wetter? Where are we getting the floods? So that uncertainty complicates things. Then when we say an optimal solution or a good solution for whom, who is benefiting and who is losing if somebody's losing. So then the solutions are probably not great when you use these traditional ways of thinking about decisions. So what we want to do instead is create these sort of more thoughtful, iterative processes that allow us to first examine and understand what the problem is. So framing the problem, we talk about framing a lot. Explore different tools or through conversation, different potential strategies or solutions we could employ. Evaluate whether or not they will work in the future. So it might work for now and it might have worked in the past, but would it keep working in the future? Like the trees example sometimes comes up, like a tree that was serving a purpose maybe in the 90s. In a warming climate, we might need a different type of tree, or we might need a different type of solution. So would that solution keep working? Maybe, or not. So then when we go through this process and evaluate how things perform, for whom do they perform well, we want to evaluate these trade-offs and hopefully at the end make some decisions. And it's meant to be an iterative conversation that we go through. I'm not going to talk about the understanding, but there is cycles. But what I really always emphasize is that first one, that framing the problem is the problem, because we have lots of tools, we have lots of ways of solving things in our offices, in our universities. But if you don't get the framing right, if you don't get the question right, then the answer doesn't matter what your tool told you. It really is the framing. It really is what is the problem? What do I need to be doing about it? So what we really emphasize is this conversation, this dialogue that we need to be doing within BSEC with as led by our Equitable Pathway Steering Committee and with our stakeholders. So these two groups of people need to be working together to get the framing right. Otherwise, it won't work. So the tool that we often, and I won't go into like the super details of it, but the idea is that we want to think about all the things that could go wrong, all the things we can do, the key relationships that we want to understand, and the things that matter to us. So you could think about like, when we talk about external factors or the future, we could think about what can get in my way, what can go wrong. Yeah. Thank you, sorry. And then when we talk about things we can do, we're talking about strategies, potential solutions. How do I combine all the things I can do to solve my problem? When we say relationship, we often talk about like, what are the key interactions? What are the key things that affect each other that I want to map, that I want to trace? And then most importantly is how do we measure what matters? So who is in that room? What kind of things matter to them, and how we measure them are like the cornerstone of getting the framing right. Sorry, I'm yelling at you. I'm very passionate about this. Okay, so we've been hearing yesterday about all the scientists that are doing all the observations and the modeling. They're doing fantastic science, and that fantastic science is meant to inform what these relationships are like and what the future is like. So we're trying to really understand the system. But what we're hoping to get to today is this other stuff. So how can we use this time together, this very valuable time together, to better understand first what matters to the community? So how do we, what matters and how do we measure it? And secondly, what can we be doing about it? How can we be informing potential solutions? And that's my last slide. And that's all. So I'm happy to answer questions. Yeah? Oh.
I'll give you a question.
Yes.
Your passion, that ought to be rewarded. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Shamara. I'm a research engineer here at Morgan. I deal with the measurement equipment for some of the observation. So the question for you is you said the how for me, the who is the who. I think that can benefit us as a collaboration is identifying the stakeholders who are not here. But I spoke with someone else recently about the media right here. That move is something that could be beneficial. And this is how we can reach a second stakeholder, which is the young people. And so that final point, I think the economic development is being pulled here. A lot is being brought about. And so there's this need coming from an academic perspective. I'm thinking, 18 to 24, K through 12, right? And sitting here with Cynthia, one of our treatment community members, she reminded me that there's this gap with 25 to 50, 40. And that audience we can address with economic development and work. Right, and so you think about those careers that are part of planting trees, real estate development. These are the folks who I think now begin to be benefiting from this information.
I don't remember this one. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and also, science
Comment, you can hear that.
Oh,
Hello?
yeah, I can say that so the main comment was when we say what matters for whom, it's very important to consider the who is in that room expressing what matters to them. And it's very important. I'm sorry if I'm like butchering your comment. But it's very important to consider what kind of groups are there, how are we bringing them in, and just giving them that.
Yes, and an example to answer that question is thank you. Just simply that. So the provocative thing is who is the whom, and one of the answers to that who is the whom, in my opinion, can be pulling this economic development straight. One of my blinders from the academic perspective is K through 12, 18 to 24, and then the postdoc, and then into the workforce. But I think the community, which can be including targeting 25 to 50, because it's those brothers who are now in a position that need the most support. And so how are we doing that? And this is the job. Jobs like landscapers or real estate developers. Just a thought. That's what I said.
Yeah. Where, yeah, the moment I'm ready to move on to the yes.
All right, so as you all know, one of the things that we did was have a focus group dedicated to heat. And really wanted to hear from the community about how heat was impacting their neighborhoods. And so what Dr. Smith is going to do is you're going to read out of that focus group. Okay, so we're going to give them some space. And then after that, we're going to head into our focus groups. We're gonna head into our discussion round.
Oh, sorry.
We're not having focus
Right
group.
now, we have a focus group for heat. We're having community conversations and discussions for air pollution, flooding, and decarbonization, not research.
Okay, so basically, I'm gonna talk about what we've learned, what we've done, and what we're planning to do. And so here we're focusing on heat, and we chose to focus on heat first because that's where there are several of us in BSEC who had already been working with community, so we already had community ties. So we started with heat, but this is something that we plan to carry out with the other groups as well. So. Okay, so about 6 weeks ago, there was a focus. So about 6 weeks ago, there was a focus group and we held it at Morgan State University and we had different members of the community attend and there were about 30 people there. So again, this focus group was specifically on heat and we had several questions that we asked them. We had 4 different groups. They were done in different rooms and the questions focused on health. We also focused on resources to address how extreme heat impacts them, adaptation and mitigation strategies, and ones that they had and ones that they would hope to see in the future, and then just spoke a little bit about energy. We're going to go a little bit fast here because we're hoping to get us closer to back on track. So we pulled all the information together, and now we're going to give you feedback from all 4 groups, but I do want to make this clear because it's been mentioned that here, when we say community, we are referring to the people who were a part of the focus group. And we do acknowledge and recognize that that doesn't include everyone in Baltimore City, but these were the people who were there to help us at the time. So the first one was health.
All right, thank you. 2 more things that I wanted to clarify. One is this is just reporting on what we heard from the community, and we just pulled together the themes that we could categorize all those findings into. And also we have not put these into, like we have not listed them based on the number of times they were mentioned. So
more analysis coming.
More analysis coming right now. It's just the themes that we identified. So related to health, there were lots of health issues mentioned. For example, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, blood pressure drop, breathing issues, asthma, dehydration. I think that was the most popular one across 4 groups. And that was because of the lack of access to water, especially during the heat events. We will talk a lot more about that when we talk about the resources. We had issues related to eczema that was also related to water. Children were showing rashes on their skin because they realized the water had some contamination. After they saw those issues, they started testing the water and they found contamination in the water. Again, that is also related to resources and old infrastructure. The pipes are old, contamination is leaking into water, and that is causing issues. Again, other issues related to lightheadedness, faint, and also hospital admission.
And so I want to stop here to point out that some of these things the heat group has already been working on. So one of the things that we've been working on, or people within the heat group, is looking at asthma hospitalizations in children and in adults, and also looking at variations in heat stress depending on the time of day, which is one of the things that was brought out in the focus groups. It was about people liking to spend time outdoors and on their stoops and steps talking with each other. So understanding like how this might be impacted during different times of the day. Right now, we're talking specifically about the heat group, but please note these things because for you, as you move into your next groups, you all might be able to use this data. You should be able to use it also.
All right, so moving on to the resources to address, there were lots of resources. We tried to group them into specific categories. The first one was kind of inside the category of green-blue infrastructure, which started with having more living trees, but it wasn't always the case of we need more trees. In some cases, there are already some trees, but the issue is keeping up with the maintenance. So having access to volunteers who take care of the trees. In some cases, there were trees planted and then cut down by the community because they were not able to maintain the tree, or they were causing lots of issues in terms of like water drainage, or they needed more space for parking lots, so they just removed the tree and put down more concrete to have more parking lots. But overall, they needed having more living trees to provide effective natural cooling and shade for individuals. Another one was about like water distribution. There were discussions around that people are trying to be sustainable, so they are not using water bottles, plastic water bottles, but at the same time, there is not that much of like, so portable water is an issue. And also they were saying like when there is a heat event or when there is a heat wave, we really need to have access to clean, purified water. So access to clean and cold water, ensure everyone had access to hydration. And then the other topic was water pools. So there are some neighborhoods that do have pools that people can use, especially kids, to cool down during heat waves. But having access in some other neighborhoods, it is not. So when it is far away, they need to have access to transportation to access these water pools. So the absence of public transportation poses a significant challenge for some individuals. The other topic that was mentioned was sprinkler systems and spraying water. So people, especially kids, can use them. They go just under the sprinklers to cool down. But again, this water is not clean in some cases, and that is going to cause some health issues. So even though those are helpful, but there are still some issues with the existing ones. The other one, this is also overlapping with the other topics that I mentioned, free water access. Participants expressed that accessible water is a fundamental need, and the shift from free access to purchasing water raises concerns. Also, we talked about permeable pavers and how that can help with this issue. And then the other category was the cooling provisions. For example, having cooling centers throughout the city so residents can seek relief from extreme heat. These spaces can provide air-conditioned spaces, hydration, and a safe place for populations that are more vulnerable to heat. And then the other category was air conditioners. This is very critical, especially for elderlies. Some of them either do not have access to air conditioners, or it is like there are some programs that provide the air conditioner, but at the same time, they are hard to install. So seniors need help from volunteers to install the air conditioners. But then there is another layer to it that they get the air conditioners installed, and then the first electricity bill comes and it's very high, so people stop using them. So there would be some following discussions related to that we need some affordable like billing system for electricity. Oh, just came up, affordable energy options. So especially those with limited resources can help get financial strain during the summer months, because that's when people really need those systems. And then they talked about like low income solar programs and how that can reduce energy bills and making it more affordable to maintain a comfortable living environment during hot weather. I already talked about improved infrastructure, so let's focus on other time and money. We know that some of these issues require lots of time and also financial resources, so that is something to be addressed. Again, public transportation barriers. There is limited access to public transportation presents a barrier, and also facing challenges with the cost of alternative transportation modes. If people want to get, for example, the example of water pools, if people want to get access to them, it is too hot, the public transportation is not working efficiently, so this is causing, again, some issues. And then they discuss having maps updated. For example, there are some initiatives in terms of planting new trees. So the community need to have access to updated maps in terms of the local initiatives that are happening for planting the trees, so they know which parts of the community needs is still in need of planting more trees. And then the topic of nonprofit initiatives, so they can help with all these initiatives that we already talked about.
Oh, okay. So here where, and you can't see it, but, well, here's where Extreme Heat Group has already been working. So if we think about updated maps, which is one of the things that was requested by the community. So Extreme Heat Group has already been working to expand weather stations and also improve the estimates. So for those who don't know, like most of the estimates are not at the neighborhood level. So trying to build up that monitoring network so we can tell neighborhood by neighborhood whether the difference is, and also thank you. And also plans for the future that have been in discussion about conducting thermal drone flights, and that's at bus stops to measure the different temperature changes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, so we asked several questions about the mitigation strategies or adaptation. So they mentioned several issues. So we categorized those in four factors. So first is related with environment. So here people talked about the importance of tree planting and maintenance. So they mentioned about how shading is very important in their neighborhood and how several kind of training on maintenance, like using art caps and other tree care practices can enhance the tree health. So they want some education and some extended training. So sometimes it takes the long to take care of the plants. So short, they prefer long one. And then mention about the mindset change in tree adoption. So participants mentioned about some previous past experience of like falling down the large tree branches over the concrete, which can like do harm to their buildings and others. So they were telling like if it is possible to go to the neighborhood and advocate and like work how we can make them like accept about the tree adoption thing. And they also mentioned about environmental justice concern, how policies and regulations should think on that. And then the several participants like introduced the issue of energy efficiency and conservation. So to how we can promote, how it's important to promote awareness, support, and about energy efficiency. And they also talked about like how we can redesign the urban planning. So it requires open discussion, innovative thinking, and all the stakeholders should come together to think on it. So they stressed on creative approaches and mentioned like we should explore innovative and unconventional solutions beyond the traditional methods.
And so in the area of tree planting and maintenance, again, on the extreme heat side, there has been people who have been involved in city tree inventory. So we can learn which types of trees survive and which urban environments best, because if we're going to have investments put in certain areas in trees, we're going to want to make sure that those are surviving as long as possible.
Second category is about community and community engagement. So they mentioned several issues. So firstly, they talked about people-centric investment. So some folks mentioned like we already have enough infrastructure, but we need to invest on people, like how we can train them, how we can do the workforce development, and we can like introduce the collaborative efforts. And they also mentioned the importance of go back to basics. Sometimes we already had some good things that we lost. So how can we do that? And they mentioned several community-driven environmental programs like utilizing vacant buildings, investing on sustainability and others, and how community engagement can be important to have those things going on. And several community initiatives like promoting and awareness and support and creating a sense of community and mutual understanding, and the importance of community navigators where people will go to small groups and like talk about the important things. And community associations. So is it possible to bring the neighborhood associations together to like work with the climate issues? and involvement of urban farmers. So how we can introduce the urban garden and urban farmers into this. And then they mentioned about children and senior people. So they like stress it's very important to have the children and elderly people on board as well. So how we can do child-centric environmental education. So they mentioned like if we pay them students some money to plant a tree and give them monthly incentives to water them, then they will feel, oh, I have planted it, and it will like go to their family, and everyone will be interested in it. And about seniors, they mentioned like sometimes the condition they are living with, they're facing flooding, mold, and other things, which are like adding more problems on heat issues. And about the senior health management, we need to give some like information and resources how they can do the stress management. So the
And again, this group has already been working alongside community members to locate and set up weather stations throughout Baltimore City. So we are currently engaging the community in BSEC. Of course, that doesn't mean everyone, but we are making efforts to expand that in the future.
And they also mentioned about the importance of workforce development. So they mentioned like sometimes the all like retired people are working there, but we are missing the mainstream 20 to 40 years old workforce. So can we introduce some sort of incentives to like have them on board and introduce these things in schools and middle schools to have the children related students who are studying with urban forestry, agroforestry, or climate awareness, and the importance of small learning groups. So it's easier to like get involved all these issues. And then they mentioned about extended training initiatives where they will also have a holistic approach. So not only tree maintenance, they will have awareness about ecological, social, and economical aspects of this. And they need technical assistance, like how they can communicate with other community peoples. And they also mentioned about the importance of including churches on this process.
And so you all already heard a little bit earlier during the session about how we have been engaging students and interns and community members to work. We do pay those who work on the steering committee, and then we do also have funding to pay people who are working on projects in the future.
And there are some other issues which talks about grants and incentives. So they stressed it's very important to share the best practices for successful grant applications. So they mentioned like we are good, but we know we can be better, but how we can do that. So we want how people are getting successful. Can they share back their like experiences? And they mentioned like it's important to like sometimes we see all same people are getting funds and grants regularly. So we need to have like diversity in it so different people can come up here. Then they talk about investments like preventive centric investments. So before it happens, how can we create awareness for health, healthy food access, and information dissipation? And inclusive job and opportunities in green infrastructure. So can we create job opportunities so that the young people get attracted to all these efforts? And about information, they mentioned about the importance of information dissemination. So how people can access to all the resources they have, and also effective communication. So they shared maybe utilizing the newsletters in their food boxes can give them the powerful communication about the relevant information.
And we have worked with community members or community organizations and groups to submit grants. As you heard earlier, a couple of those were successful. And so we're hoping to continue along those lines a lot more in the future.
So our fourth category was heat, temperature, and energy. So here people mentioned about the energy burden and high energy bills, and also how we can have they can have affordable energy options, and also they want to like have technical knowledge on heat stress management.
And there's currently research going on in the heat group about energy efficient during extreme energy efficiency during extreme heat events.
Mhm. And lastly, the other issues like they mentioned about importance of education on like several outdoor programs and flexibility in education for children can be introduced, and we can create awareness about like hydration, because sometimes people have alcohol and they feel it's an alternative of water. So they feel I'm already drinking. Why should I drink water? So they mentioned that we need to make them understand it's important to like get hydrated, and informed tree plantation and maintenance. And also motivate people with because they are sometimes surviving with financial stability. So it will be better if we can offer incentives. And they need to access to resources because sometimes they're in a long waiting list for assistance programs. So how we can simplify the information. And then financial assistance on support the tree planting, because they say like they want free water because it's expensive with limited income to like pay for the water. And maintenance, mitigating challenges, tree planting near vacant homes. Sometimes the trees are planted near vacant home, but there's no one to maintain those. So how can we address that issue? And communication with state and city grants. So they need transparency and they need to hear back like why people are getting and what's the process. And communication in initiative induced changes. So they say we want to see what they are doing with the grant funded initiatives. So we want to know about the changes.
And so what now? So we have information, we've gotten feedback from the community about what are their needs, what are their priorities, particularly in relation to extreme heat. We also know that we have scientists gathering data and working on these issues, but how exactly do we bring this together so that we contribute to climate mitigation strategies or interventions that can really benefit the community? And this really is just bringing us back to what Antonia was just discussing before we came up here, which was the XLRM. And so the heat group has gone a little bit further than all the other groups. So this is an example of our XLRM in case that provides additional help to any of the other groups. And I'm going to go over this.
Yeah, so we were thinking about what are the issues that can be addressed with XLRM. Obviously, Antonia is here. She is the expert. She can help us. So there are some stuff maybe we need to revise, but it's just an initial idea. So the X means like outside the control of the decision makers. So for heat, the X factors can be the frequency of heat stress, climate change, the population growth, the changes in for economical or political status, what's the current mindset, natural disasters like flooding and earthquake, how the vegetation will grow, the grant approval process, and also the community acceptance and preferences. So these are actually outside of the control. L means the policy levers. So it means the near-term actions, the alternative strategies. So these are the optimizing factors. So their levers can be tree planting, urban planning, use of building materials, like what type of materials are there on buildings, on pavements, and others. Addressing the neighborhood parks and how we can work with urban gardens. What are the financial assistance we can provide, and what we can do with education and awareness, etc. And R means relationship. So it is the expected outcome. So it is the potential, what is the relationship we care about. So it can have several issues like where is it, the location, the impact on human health and performance, living condition in the community, job opportunity, transportation, access to affordable energy, investment and grants, etc. And lastly, what are the measures we can take? So it is the performance standard and decision making for community people, and decision makers can use it to rank what do they want to do. So how we can measure it? So we can measure it maybe the change in environmental parameters like temperature, relative humidity, air quality, water quality, soil condition, and others. How it is impacting the human health, like the number of hospital admission, number of heat-related death, or performance like missing school and offices. And we can also measure the changes as energy bill. So do they have an impact on energy bills and energy burden? And also the changes in vegetation or tree health that we can see. So several issues can be addressed in this framework.
So this is in general for extreme heat, but of course we can't work really this generally. It's this. So we wanted to bring like a real world example of how this might work. So this is an example because this is something that we kind of been thinking about, but it was mentioned in the focus groups of a need for people and a concern, right? So even in extreme heat, and I'll admit this isn't one that initially came to my mind for the subject of extreme heat. But we're right, if we're going to have cooling centers or pools or resources that are open for people, then they often need to be able to reach those. Also in extreme heat, one of the complaints is that, well, people use public transportation to go to work, different things, so they're outside in the heat. So what's the problem? Well, people are hot waiting on the bus. Okay, so that's a really general problem that we can learn, something we can learn from the community, but why does this problem exist, right? So to be able to solve the problem, we need a little bit more information. So many people might have different ideas around why the problem exists. And so this is where it comes in, where we combine community knowledge and then we can add some science to that. So maybe it's the location of the bus stop, right? So maybe if this bus stop were located a little bit north or a little bit south, it wouldn't be as hot, right? Maybe it's something about the shelter of the bus stop. Some bus stops don't have a shelter at all. Maybe it's what the shelter is made of. Or maybe, you know, our temperature's lower where bus stops have trees hanging over them, right? So those are different things. Maybe it's neither of those. Maybe it's that they're just in the heat too long waiting on the bus. So then maybe we should actually be focusing on the transit routes, how long it's taking for buses to get to people. So these are all different things that could be contributing to the problem of people being hot while we're waiting on the bus. And those are things that we can start to answer with scientific questions. And so how do we do this? We use our science to think about what are options for solutions, but we use the XLRM framework to bring that together to think what is the most effective solution. And then of course that will be fed back to the community to see what is their input on this, what's their take. And also another thing that we want to think about as we're thinking of solutions is who's going to solve this issue. Because for every problem we have a solution, but then we also have, where's the solution coming from? So who has the money to implement a solution, right? Being practical, there's no solution without funding. But then also once we create a solution, who can implement it, right? Can we help to train people so that people in the Baltimore community can be part of the workforce who implements the solution? So these are just some things to think about around the processing. That's all we have for. So questions.
So I was at this focus group, and I'm not quite sure where one of the issues I had is in the presentation. And that is an issue of government, city policy, as they relate to certain things that people are advocating for. As a resident of Baltimore City, and I'll just use trees, you understand that people want to get trees, people want trees, they get grants to plant trees, but as a resident, I get fined for a tree if the tree is overgrown. So it's not necessarily a matter of paying someone to maintain it, it's also a matter of having Baltimore City examine their rules and policies around that to maybe change some of those things regarding who gets fined for what. And I don't see in this presentation, I just heard you say about if we create a solution, then who's gonna implement it and who's gonna pay for it? Because some of the solutions are really just rethinking government policy. And I'm not quite clear where that gets into this as opposed to everyone creating a new solution that needs to be funded, but looking at some of the things that don't need to be funded, that can be changed, that can help some of the things people are. But where's that?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you there. I think that part comes in the XLRM process of it, right? So we're feeding back information from the community, but again, that's where we can balance and learn more and and Tony's not here, but about the trade-offs, right? For every positive thing or thing that someone thinks is positive, there are negatives or some ways that they might be negative. And then so we can look at those and then say, well, maybe this is not a solution. People are proposing this as a solution, or maybe there's a more effective solution or more appropriate solution. And so that's where we can look at those things and balance them out. That is also why I said, when we go through this, the next step is to come back to the community. So that's also why we do this, and then we feed it back to you all, and then you all let us know, okay, what are we missing? Are there some things that we're not thinking about in this process that will impact the people who are affected by these interventions or these things that come down the line?
Do you think that there's a broader convening power that BSEC can play? Like, I think on one of the community slides, the organizations that you're working with, is that done in one setting, almost like this type of thing? And could that be done? BSEC using its convening power for these types of groups, like the association folks, bring them all together at once and give it deeply.
I think I'm going to pass this one to Ben, but I think this is most of the time our activities are done separately in different groups.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, and that's hopefully what the XLRM process is going to do. So to maybe put this in a little context as we kind of transition to the other areas. So as was indicated, these topic areas of heat, indoor air pollution, decarbonization, flooding came out of some of the discussions we had last January and so on. Right? The next step was to do some of these just general sessions, like, okay, let's talk more about this with our people, see what kind of things are going to do. Now with heat, what we're doing is we're pivoting into this kind of formal solution space, which will run the XLRM process. What that's going to require, and going to step out, but like, is a very focused group of people. Say, okay, like a handful who represent different kinds of stakeholders, right? You got people for various parts of the community who are going to kind of commit to a couple of sessions, right? Where they really sit and dig through and say, okay, we're going to go from concern to solution. Like, what does this solution look like? What are the scenarios? And when we meet those folks and when we're working with the help of people here today who should be at that table, then we can meet some of those particularly important stakeholders for different problems. And hopefully that pushes them through. So it's kind of a balance. It's not, you can't do this, I'm told, with the next arm. You can't use it in a row behind. You need a small group of people who are really drilling down. And so how do you pick the right people to be there and give them that action?
And the other thing too that we're going to try to do it iteratively, so that folks, you know, if we miss something like Cynthia, I think I might have forgotten to write that down. I'm sorry, but if we miss something, make sure we come back and have those folks talk in the process. It's not like a one-off, someone's represented. So the fact that we have a chance to talk to folks, we need a smaller group of people to be able to kind of move the thing forward.
I do want to highlight that convening is part of this, right? And hopefully we can leverage the fact that, you know, that BSEC with all the institutions involved, so that the steering committee members with all their contacts, to you a few people who like maybe aren't here right now, but need to be here. It's like, hey, this is a real opportunity. Let's get you in the room, and then you get both their voice and their ears on the process.
And that's what makes the data so valuable, being shared.
I'm gonna sign out as a
Make the feelings up. All right.
All right. So, home stretch people, and I'm gonna go. And do those questions. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna get how are you doing on food? All right, here. So, so what we're gonna do now, 6 o'clock Friday. So, we're gonna have really quick. So as I mentioned, that was the heat group that's, as we said, has already done a convening and is now like working towards the XLRM. after we finish in here, what we're gonna have is we're gonna have a possibility that as we grab our food, we got a few classrooms out there, and people can kind of casually go in and join some conversations, right? About decarbonization, right? About air quality, and about flooding. The three that haven't had any convening yet. And the people leading those groups have assembled some questions so we can start having the conversation. You know, again, the group here today is a great, small group. It's obviously not the voice of all the community, but we can kind of start seeing how are these questions working, get some perspectives, or go in the right direction. And then the heat group is also going to be getting together. Anyone who wants to start drilling down to this process, like what is this XLRM like, can head into that room with the heat folks and talk to them about that. And we're gonna do that casually again while people grab some food. To tee this up, I'm gonna ask the leads of or one of the researchers from the flooding, the air pollution, and decarb, the greenhouse gas decarbonization group, to come down and give just a one-slide overview of what's gonna be going on in your room. And it might, yeah, I think hopefully we have them here. Let's see.
201, 202, and 203, right outside.
Yeah. All right, not gonna worry about it. Nah, not for this. Okay. So let's make sure that we got all the presentations lined up. So yours is already open. Yep. That one. You're that one. Yep. And then this one's. We don't have anyone else up. Give me 1 second. Sure. So I can open the other ones. All right. So. No, Zoom seems to be on. I don't know what the sign out is. Yeah, but we're declared. Oh, okay. Because I don't have a presentation. Okay, and who's doing the greenhouse gases? Lisa?
I'm here, Ben, for decarbonization.
Hey, can you just share a screen for that one?
I could share a screen, yeah.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and do you first since we got you, and then we'll go to Michael, and then hopefully we'll get the water when I can't find the water. Claire, where on Google Drive is the water?
I think it's under clean water and waterfall.
Okay.
If you could allow me to share a screen, that would be great.
That would be great.
I think you have to stop it.
Oh, I'm actually sharing it. Thank you. And then do I need to give you permission or do you, let's see.
Or you can give the ability to people to share.
Yeah, okay. All right. Let's see if that worked for you, Ram. Did that work? Yeah.
I don't think that's the same as.
Yeah, I know. I thought that. Oh, he's got it. It worked. Whatever it was, it worked. Okay, cool. All right. So we're just going to do a quick overview. And again, these are the 3 other areas that were identified as priorities that we're using as the first examples of this XLRM. So, Ram, why don't you go ahead? Ram, we're seeing the slide. We're not hearing you all of a sudden. Oh, there you are.
Now?
Yep, got you.
Okay, very good. So hello, everyone. My name is Rahman Azari, and I'm an architecture professor at Pennsylvania State University. So decarbonization cross-cut group is, as the name suggests, about decarbonization. But for us to first know what decarbonization is about, by definition, it's about reducing greenhouse gas emissions by addressing the sources of greenhouse gas emissions. So the main motivation of this cross-cut group is about doing research because we know that cities are responsible for more than 60% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. And our objective is to identify pathways that not only reduce Baltimore's greenhouse gas emissions, but also to improve equity. So in the context of Baltimore, understanding of the sources of those greenhouse gas emissions is important if we want to develop effective decarbonization strategies. The primary contributors to GHG emissions in the city include energy sector, transportation sector, and waste management processes. As you could see in the pie chart on the right, about 44% of greenhouse gas emissions in Baltimore are caused by commercial and industrial uses. 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the city is emitted by energy and electricity for residential buildings. And this is the energy that we consume to heat our buildings, cool our buildings, and power our buildings. 22% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the city is caused by the transportation sector. In other words, vehicles on the roads. And 14% is caused by waste management processes such as landfill decomposition or methane release. So if we want to transition towards a low carbon city, it's important to address these sectors and these sources of GHG emissions. So the main objective of the Crosscut group is to develop pathways to decarbonize different sectors. Starting with buildings, there are multiple ways to address the carbon emissions of building. Retrofitting is one example. In other words, how we could add insulation or how we could add different high-performance window systems in order to reduce the energy consumption of the buildings, and in that way, reduce the carbon emissions that is caused because of the energy consumption of the buildings. Green design and green construction of new buildings is another important strategy. And also we want to eventually integrate renewable energies into design and construction of buildings. Another sector to decarbonize, as I mentioned, is transportation and transit. So development of alternative transportation systems that are low carbon and reducing traffics is an objective in decarbonization in this sector. Urban greening is another important, adding vegetation, increasing the number of trees, and therefore increasing the amount of carbon that could be sequestered or stored is another strategy for decarbonization that also leads to the reduction of the urban heat island. So it has co-benefits as well. So this is a diagram that represents a big picture of the relationship between the decarbonization crosscut theme with other components of the BSEC project. So the idea is that we in the decarbonization crosscut theme are going to use and implement the outcomes or the data provided by the themes. And as you may already know, there are multiple themes in the BSEC project: greenhouse gases, buildings and energy, vegetation, soil and ecosystems, atmospheric sciences. We have multiple crosscuts as well. So the idea is to, as I said, take advantage of the data and research that is completed in different themes and understand the interrelations between these themes, or the interrelation, for example, between the buildings and energy and heat and greenhouse gases, and how we could develop the effective decarbonization strategies in order to mitigate the effect of climate change in Baltimore. So a quick overview of what has been done so far. We have been collecting data using low-cost networks and other types of sensors that have been helping us in order to understand greenhouse gas emissions, air quality, and other data. We have been developing new climatic models in order to predict GHG emissions and understand impact of interventions. Objective is to kind of simulate the future GHG emissions. We also are trying to pilot test framework to simulate building carbon emissions. And for that, for all of these activities, we have been able to recruit smart PhD students who are helping us. And then with that, I'll pass it to my colleague, Professor Lisa Yulo, if Lisa is around. Is Lisa there?
in the room where we'll be looking at this evening. We're going to be trying to, look at the interrelated issues of what are the challenges, that you see related to greenhouse gas emissions and decarbonization, goals for Baltimore or in your specific communities in Baltimore. What is it that you, value that is threatened by changing climates, and unchecked greenhouse gas emissions? What knowledge, do we need, to be able to, address issues, and, what action can be taken? And of course, these things, we're going to be looking at them all as, related to try and prioritize and get to some paths forward.
Great, thank you guys. All right, that was a good overview. Now we're gonna have some brief introductions to the other two topics. All right, great, very brief. All right, thanks so much, Raman. Okay, so over to Michael. No.
It's fine. All right, so I'm gonna give the fastest introduction. So outdoor air pollution, we all know is a serious issue, right? We know that we spend most of our time inside in the United States, so we breathe most outdoor air pollution inside. We also know that housing and HVAC characteristics mediate that indoor air exposure to outdoor air pollution, and they have a big influence on it. We know that housing quality and HVAC presence-absence characteristics vary across Baltimore and are often correlated with socioeconomic status. So what we're proposing to do is develop a tool that we can use to explore how differences in housing and outdoor air pollution lead to neighborhood level differences in indoor exposures and health effects. Okay, and so if you want to learn about this tool, please come visit us in a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Michael.
Okay.
There's some aggressive text being sent there to Michael. All right, so and so then Claire, last but certainly not least, and this is going to be something PowerPoint.
Presentations.
That's it. 1110 BSEC.
1110 BSEC. This one right here. All right, great. All right. So we're gonna do like a quick overview, right? Like 1 or 2 slides. Yeah, good.
Okay, so next slide wasn't.
Thank you. Getting tired here. All right.
So this is the flooding team. Just quickly, why does flooding matters? So the community partners in Baltimore a year ago at our January meeting expressed interest in street and basement flooding caused by intense storms and water quality is related to humans' exposure to urban runoff. So that's what the topic is about. So we have this entertaining video to show you, if I can get it to go, to motivate you as to why water quality is important. If I could get this thing to click.
So close.
That's what happens when rainwater infiltrates the sanitary sewer. It can blow off the manhole and you get a sewage exposure. Do it again. All right.
And then you can't get it to stop.
I can't get it to stop. Okay, so what we wanted, the last slide is we invite you to join us in room 203.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. So there's food's ready. So here's what I suggest. Why don't people go out, grab yourself some food, and then the 3 rooms are all right there, and then wander into the one that makes sense for you. And we are not going to make people come back after this. So grab some food, enjoy the breakout discussions. Thank you all so much for making time in your life for BSEC, and we will be in touch soon.